Hello and welcome along to this series about Rugby League show. I'm Will Jackson, your host. Joining me is Sam Brocksom from Series About Rugby League, and we've got Peter Smith from the Yorkshire Evening Post. Just before we get cracking with the Super League preview, can I just ask you all to like this video and subscribe to the channel? That would be really useful to us. Thank you. So look, the Super League season is now upon us. Gets underway on Thursday evening when Hull KR, the treble winners, obviously from last season, travel to York Knights. They're obviously new to Super League, so it's going to be an intriguing one. It's been a long off-season, obviously. I know the three of us on this call are very relieved to see the start of the season come around, so no more scrimping and scraping for stories. So we'll obviously look ahead to round one later on in this episode, but we're going to preview every single Super League club today. So it's going to be an interesting one. We'll start with Hull KR. Sam, do you think this squad's built for success, for sustained success?
I think some of the recruits that they've made certainly point that way. They've brought in Tom Amon, to replace Jared Royer-Hargreaves. I think he's a really good prop. He's obviously shown what he can do in Super League with Lee Leopards. A couple of kind of fringe players and kind of emerging prospects that can kind of fill their kind of squad depth for the next few years. Whether I think that they're the type of players that can go on to be first team players, it remains to be seen. But I think certainly this year, Hull KR will fancy themselves. I think there is a lot of questions or a few questions over whether they can do it. I think one of the big ones for Hull KR is Las Vegas. We obviously saw how Las Vegas last year affected both Wigan and Warrington, and I think Hull KR will try to learn off that. But I think just the way that the schedule is for both Leeds and Hull KR, I think both sides will struggle, especially in the early part of the season, and it's how Hull KR kind of adapt to that. I think that's kind of my big question, especially for the start of the year. And then obviously when we get to the kind of summertime, that'll kind of iron itself out, and Hull KR will no doubt be back at the top end of the table.
Yeah, Pete, obviously Jared Royer-Hargreaves is gone, Nicky McIlaurin's gone. There were two obviously experienced players that helped them get over the line last season, but now they're established winners. Do you think that they're going to be able to cope without them? Do you think they'll be able to, to manage that themselves?
I don't think the squad's is weaker than it was last year. I mean, you could argue maybe it's even a touch stronger. They have lost some quality players, but Amon's a good replacement for Royer-Hargreaves. Jeslin obviously is an outstanding hooker. I don't think they're going to struggle at all in terms of the squad depth. Their issue is that they're now the big guns in the competition, treble winners. They've got a big target on the back. Every team that plays them will see it as their cup final. They're going to have to be on their game every single week, which is tough. It's harder to retain a title than it is to win it. Wigan found that last year. I mean, this time last year, everyone was saying Wigan would sweep the board again, and they didn't. Hull KR knocked them off the perch. I don't think Hull KR will win it this year. I think there'll be different winners. I've said before, I think there'll be three different winners of each major competition. Hull KR will be up there competing. I think, as I say, I think they'll find it really, really hard to build on what they did last year. You can't improve, really, can you, on a season like that when you win everything? As Sam says, they've got a lot of distractions earlier in the year with the World Club and with Vegas. The beauty, obviously, of the Super League format is that's not really going to matter. As long as they finish in the top six, they're going to have an opportunity of competing for the grand final, and they'll certainly finish in the top six. But I as I say, I wouldn't tip them as grand final winners this year. That said, they're going to go into it with as much chance as anyone else and fancying it. And they do have the flip side to being the target is they've been there and done it, and they have that experience, which is so crucial. So I think they'll have a decent season. They'll be up there challenging, but I don't see them being as dominant this year as last year.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, leave your predictions for who's going to win the Super League till the end, because I'm going to ask you at the end. Wigan Warriors arguably their biggest competition. Sam, do they have a bit of a point to prove in 2026? Obviously, after a trophyless season last year.
Yeah, certainly. And I think they'll be looking to, they went trophyless, I think, for the first time bar Matt Pete's first season in charge, the first time that they've gone trophyless. So that'll be a different kind of change for them, and something that they'll be hoping to rectify this year. I think, as we've said, anything that kind of Hull KR struggle with, Wigan need to capitalise on, and it is that early season kind of the schedule that Hull KR have got that Wigan kind of need to capitalise on, and from there they just kind of need to cement that place, at the top of the table. And I think we all know that they've got the star players, your Jai Field, your Bevan French, players like that can just change a game in a moment. And Bevan French were injured for the middle of last season, and I think if he stays injury fit, I think injury free, and he's playing as well as we know he can, there's no reason why Wigan can't at least claim that top spot. And if they don't go on to win the grand final, then I think they'll certainly be in with a shout for the League Leaders Shield.
Yeah, there's a couple of players with points to prove, isn't there, at Wigan? Obviously, Junior Nsemba's one of them, having dropped off towards the end of last season and then missed out on an England spot. Pete, there's a couple of others there, isn't there, as well, that they really need to get themselves together, and when they're firing on all cylinders, they can be really big weapons for Wigan.
Well, I think, yeah, as Sam says, they're a very strong squad, and they have outstanding individuals, particularly Bevan French. I mean, let's face it, when he's fit and he's on his game, he's the best player in the competition. Jai Field's not that far behind him. If those two stay fit all year and play to their level, then we're going to have a very, very hard team to beat. They were a totally different proposition last year when French was in the side to when he was on the sidelines for a long spell, and they suffered some poor defeats during that time and didn't really look like grand final contenders at that stage. But he came back at the right time and took them to Old Trafford, albeit didn't play particularly well on the day. So that they are going to be fired up. We can always seem to take it as a personal affront if they don't win anything. They enjoy being the top dogs, and they won't have enjoyed seeing Hull KR take that mantle. And I think they'll be really fired up this year. They've not made that many changes to the squad, so they're fairly settled. They're just a good team. We know that they're always hard to beat, and they'll definitely be. We're not really saying anything new or unexpected here, are we? They're definitely going to be up there competing, and they'll be in the top four. They'll be in the semi-finals of the of Super League, and probably competing in the Challenge Cup, depending who they get in the draw. And you'd be very foolish to bet against Wigan in any contest. They've got such a good culture there and a winning culture, and they do have a really strong academy as well. Players come through. And a bit like December a couple of years ago, they come through and they instantly look like Super League players. So they've got an awful lot going for them. You just have to admire the consistency of a club like Wigan. They very rarely have poor years. They don't sign poor players. When they sign people, it tends to work out. I think they'll be real challengers this year, as always.
Yeah. I'll ask you then, will Leeds Rhinos be real challengers this year?
I think potentially, yes. I think they're capable of it. I like the first 17 squad. I think they lack a little bit of experience in depth, as we saw in the Challenge Cup last weekend when they rested a couple of players and had a lengthy injury list. They had to bring some young kids in, and the kids actually came in and did really well. I've been talking about George Brown for a while. He came in and played at fullback and did okay, and then switched to the halves and looked good. Fergus McCormack, who's sort of a bit of a forgotten man at Leeds, he missed virtually the whole of last season. He played half a game in the reserves at Bradford, had some horrible injury problems with his hamstring. He came back and played at fullback and looked really good. There's a number of other kids that could come in and shine for Leeds, but I think the key for them is keeping their main men fit. Really, if they can keep Jake Connor on the field for most of the season and Brodie Croft and Lockie Miller at fullback, they're going to compete with anyone. They need to prove that they can win the big games. That's something that Leeds, over sort of a 10-year period, were very, very good at. This Leeds side have to show that they can do that. But quality-wise, I think they're right up there. They've got a very good coach. They're highly motivated. They were close last year, controversial and dubious, we should say, semi-final defeat to or playoff defeat to St Helens. They're a good team. They're fun to watch as well, and I think they'll be up there challenging as well. Top 4, I think, but there's quite a number of clubs that feel that they're capable of a top 4 spot. I don't think Leeds will finish top, but I think they'll be right in the mix throughout the year.
Yeah, what about Leeds Leopards, Sam? Well, obviously they've reached 2 semi-finals in a row now. Have they reached their ceiling now, or for a club that size, or can they keep on progressing and can they really take that next step under Adrian Lamb this season?
Yeah, I think they can. I really like Adrian Lamb as a head coach. I think obviously he didn't really work out at Wigan, but he's found himself in the league job, and he's working wonders. Obviously he's got his son Lachlan there playing arguably the best performances of his career. What was it, 41 assists last year? And if he continues that record or that form, there's no reason why they can't. I think we'll go on to it a bit later in the predictions, but I do actually have Leeds to finish second. I think just the way that their squad is, they've not recruited too many as they have done in previous seasons, but I think the ones that they have brought in are going to be really solid. Adam Cook, he's new to Super League. He's only played a handful of NRL games, but I think if he can partner with Lachlan Lamb in the halves, he's certainly an upgrade on Gareth O'Brien. No disrespect to him. Liam Horn is kind of that versatile 9 and 13 role that can kind of come off the bench and add that little bit of attacking threat, and he's solid in defence as well. And I think the signings that they have made are just really solid, and I think they have improved their squad. Obviously, one question with Lee is obviously where they fit Bailey Hodgson when David Armstrong comes back. Because obviously, Armstrong is your NRL star signing from last season, and he's going to be first choice when he comes back in about round 8. And Bailey Hodgson has not really done anything to warrant him being dropped out of the squad. And whether he plays on the wing or whether he doesn't get game time, I think Bailey Hodgson needs to be in that squad wherever it is. I think he's kind of proved that over the half a season that he got in 2025. And yeah, just on the whole, I really like the look of Lee this year. And I think I tipped him to come second, so I clearly think they'll do well.
Yeah. Pete, St Helens have made 6-7 new signings. Obviously, the big changes, the new head coach Paul Rowley stepping in there. But is Jackson Hastings the missing piece of the puzzle for you?
Potentially. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? It's a few years since he was such a dominant force in Super League, but he's a quality player. If he stays fit, we know what he can do. He's never quite reproduced the form he showed in his big season at Salford for other clubs, for Wigan and in the NRL. But yeah, if he's on song, I think the style that Saints would play will suit him. I think he'll suit Saints' style of play, and he could be a real force in Super League. I like Saints' coach. I like the way that Paul Rowley plays the game. I like the squad they've got and the signings they've made. And Sam's already tipped Lee to finish second. So if we're going to mention predictions, they're my dark horses. I'm going to go out on a limb and tip Saints for top spot. Not necessarily to win the grand final, but I just like the look of Saints this year, and they're guaranteed 4 points when they play Leeds. So that puts them ahead of everybody else at this stage.
Just on Jackson Hastings, I spoke to him at the Super League launch on Wednesday. I asked him, obviously, he's a Great Britain international, whether England would be something on his radar, and he was very, very keen on playing for England this year. I mean, Pete, you're sort of wincing there, but are you not a fan of Jackson Hastings playing for England?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Every other sport does it. Cricket. It's just not. It doesn't. Nobody bats an eyelid. Same with rugby union. I mean, there's an old cricket joke. Where do England cricketers stay when they're on tour of South Africa with their parents? Boom. So I don't see why. We shouldn't do it. But I would hope that we've got other people that can play the role. I'd rather see a homegrown player come through and prove that they can slot into that position. If you're picking a scrum half, I'd hope it would be Jake Connor for the forthcoming World Cup. But that obviously depends on his form. But if he plays like he did last year, then he should be in there. I'd pick him ahead of Hastings.
Yeah, well, Hastings is versatile and he can play a number of positions. Sam, would you have him as that 14 almost?
Yeah, I'd certainly have him in the squad. As Pete said, it's been a couple of years since he kind of lit up Super League and won the Man of Steel, but he's certainly a top player, and England need all the help they can get essentially, and the more top players, the more players with NRL experience that they can have in their side is only going to help the international team, especially at this stage. Obviously, long term, again, touching on what Pete said, just that homegrown talent needs to be the priority. But especially in this World Cup, when I suppose, as we've said before, especially with the head coach, it is kind of a free hit. Why not take Jackson Hastings? You need your best players there. You need your top form players there. And if he has a good season as he's tipped to be at St Helens, I think there's no reason why we shouldn't take him. I think the other problem with that is Harry Smith, because if Jake Connor does go, you're then taking Jackson Hastings. Where does that leave Harry Smith? And obviously, Smith's, English born and bred, and there will be questions about that. Why are you leaving out, Harry Smith when Jackson Hastings, who's an Australian, gets in the squad? So, yeah, there's a lot of questions, and obviously we'll touch more on that later in the season when a lot more rugby's been played. But yeah, I think at this stage, I wouldn't say no to Jackson Hastings being in that England squad.
Yeah, I just hope whoever we're talking about it now, aren't we? Before a ball's been kicked in Super League, I just hope that that whoever the coach is, he picks the form players, because that's not what happened for the Ashes. We all said that he was picking on what did he say? Credit in the bank, Sean Wayne. We don't want the New England coach to do that. If Jackson Hastings is qualified and he's the best halfback in the comp, then pick him. Yeah. I hope it's an Englishman that's the best halfback in the comp. An English born and bred player, should I say, not a heritage player. But I just want the coach to pick the best players available, which is a radical departure from what we've seen over the past few seasons.
Yeah, you sort of made the point I was going to make them. Let's not pick the England squad before a game's been played. Back to St Helens, and let's get back on track. The loss of Morgan Knowles, Pete, that is going to be a big one for them, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Losing players like that is bound to affect you, but I just think the squad they've got is strong, and I think the way the coach plays will suit them. He's got attacking players, hasn't he? And they look like a side that are going to score a lot of points, and I think they can cover the loss. Again, I don't see them been any weaker than last year. They were fifth last season, and they had, by their standards, a poor year. I think they'll do a lot better this term. But maybe that's jinxing them. But I just think there's a lot to like about Saints. But as we say, it's early days. We've seen them in action against Workington, and that was absolutely no sort of test before Super League. They'll have a tough opener at Warrington, and it'll be interesting to see how they go in that. But they're such a tough outfit. Everyone wrote them off. They had lots of injuries last year, and no one really thought that they'd win at Leeds in that quarter final. But they did after the hooter, and that shows what they're all about. And I think with a little bit more experience in the coaching and some quality additions, they're going to be right up there.
It's twice you brought up that game now.
Yeah,
semi-final.
Out the way, it's still a what's the word? It's a mill. But that's the problem, isn't it? With losing in a game like that, it's why Leeds. I think Leeds will have some motivation this year. They've had 4 months to stew on it. Normally, when you lose a game, you're back in action the following week. But when you lose in that sort of manner in the playoffs, it's a long time before you can put it right. I think Leeds will have been using that as motivation.
Yeah, we've spoken about last season's top 5. Then let's discuss the rest in no particular order. Start with Huddersfield. Obviously, a horrible season last year with injuries. But if I said this team could be capable of getting a top 6 if they stay injury free, what would you say, Sam?
I would disagree. And that's nothing on Huddersfield. I just think there's a lot of other teams in the league that are a lot better and in a better position, but in terms of the squad and the talent that's in it. Huddersfield, I've got them above the bottom 3, but not really competing. Obviously, if they do stay injury fit, they've got the likes of Night Levels, Tuilola, Adam Clune, who's an established NRL halfback, and I think if they stay fit, they'll certainly improve. But whether they'll make the top 6, I don't think it's a possibility this season. If they continue and keep on this trajectory that the club seem to be bringing in this whole Giants Unleashed thing, where they're trying to make the club a more positive place and trying to build off the pitch as well as on the pitch. I think that's really good. I just think 2026 is a bit too soon for Huddersfield to be back in the playoffs. But rugby league's a difficult game to predict, so who knows come September.
Yeah, Huddersfield haven't made too many signings either, but one team that has is Catalan. Pete, do you think Joel Tompkins is the head coach under the most pressure at the minute going into the season?
I don't know about under the most pressure. He's obviously under some pressure. They all are, aren't they? I was surprised when he was made head coach to bring in an inexperienced head coach like they did wasn't what I'd expect them to do. I thought they'd have signed someone from the NRL potentially, or someone certainly with more of a coaching background than Tompkins. But towards the end of the season, it seemed like he was getting his ideas across. They got a couple of good wins towards the end of the year. They always have a decent squad because they can sign Aussie players that other clubs can't. We know who's going to be a big man for them coming in from the NRL, Lewis Todd, and they're tough to beat at home, particularly in summer when it's hot and the conditions are really difficult. Obviously, it's the reverse is true from their point of view. They have to travel every other week, and that makes it difficult. I'm not sure that they're going to be a top 6 club. I think there's an awful lot of clubs, Catalans and Huddersfield are among them, that you'd say could finish anywhere from about 7th or 8th down to probably 11th or 12th. It wouldn't surprise me either way. Either way it goes with Catalans. I don't see them as challenging for honours this year, but I think they'll probably maybe be a bit more consistent than they were last season. I just think there's a bit of a question mark over Tompkins, but they appointed him. They've obviously got faith in him, and they're not a club, or they haven't been recently, a club that panicked into making big decisions. I know they got rid of Steve McNamara, which I thought was harsh, but I think they'll stick with him for this season, and they're the sort of team that will cause anybody who plays them problems. But whether they could beat a full strength Wigan, Hull KR, St Helens when they're playing well, I'm not too sure. Certainly not away from home. So I don't see them as realistic contenders for silverware at this stage. But they're going to be dangerous opposition. I think most weeks they're not a team that you're going to look at and think, well, certainly if you have to go there, well, that's an easy 2 points. They'll suffer some bad defeats, I think, but they'll also pull off some good wins against top teams.
Yeah, Pete sort of touched on him there, Sam. Lewis Dodd, obviously he's probably the most intriguing signing they've made, particularly after his disastrous year at South last season. He's under a bit of pressure, isn't he, to get things right? Obviously, he must have made the right impression because I think he signed a 1-year extension already. So he's obviously made a right impression, but he has to get things right this season, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And, in Dodd's defence, half of his NRL kind of troubles weren't really his fault. He didn't really get the playing time that, his contract commanded. And yeah, he probably is the player in Super League with the most to prove. My issue with Catalans is both Dodd and Toby Sexton, who they've signed for a year before he goes to Perth Bears. They're both number 7s. They're both halfbacks, and it's just who plays in that standoff role, that number 6 role. Who's the creative lead in that team? They're both very. They control the game. They've got good kicking games. It's just that creative option that most teams. Mikey Lewis is the creative spark in Hull KR's team. Tyrone Major get your game manager, and it's just who's that creative spark in the Catalans team that is a point of concern for me. But Lewis Dodd is a Super League winner with St Helens. He's been there before. He's been in a winning culture before. He's performed at this level, and if they can get the kind of Saints of 2022 when they beat Leeds, the Saints of 2022 Dodd back, I think that'll be a really strong signing for Catalans this year.
Yeah, let's move on to Wakefield then. Obviously, they got playoffs last season. Pete, are they primed? Are they ready to follow in Lee Leopard's footsteps and to keep on progressing up the Super League table?
They could be. A lot of people are tipping them to drop considerably down from last year. They're another in this category of teams that are anywhere from fringe of the playoffs down to the bottom 3 or 4. I think they've got as good a squad as they had last year. They've brought in an outstanding signing in Tyson Smoothie from the NRL, a grand final winner with Brisbane Broncos last season. Let's face it, if they hadn't signed him as early as they did, they probably wouldn't have got him. He's really going to be a one to watch in the competition this year. They've got a very experienced, very good coach in Darryl Powell. They've got some really exciting young players, people like Ollie Pratt and Harvey Smith, who's a real talent at hooker. They're building something for the future. They're another one who you'd say probably overachieved a little bit last year, and it's going to be hard for them to maintain that. But it's a tough place to go, is Bellevue. Nowadays, it's a very hostile atmosphere. They will challenge most teams. I think last week I tipped them for a Challenge Cup run. I think they're capable of doing well in that competition. I don't see them as grand final winners, or probably not top four. But I think they'll beat some teams that are in the top four and are in contention to win the grand final, as they did last year. They beat Hull KR convincingly at home late in the season. I don't think anybody rolled over them. They were a tough team to beat, and that's not going to change this year. They've got a bit of extra confidence, I think, from what they did last year. They've proved to themselves that they can do it. They've lost the element of surprise, though, if they did have that last season. And you'd say, well, maybe they didn't because they went to Leeds and won in round one, so everyone knew straight away what they were capable of. But I think teams are going to be a bit more wary of them this season. But they're another one of these sides that are going to be very tough to beat and will be competing for the top six. It'll be really tight. I think they're a good team. I think they're good to watch, and they're not far off getting to a final or winning a silverware. I don't think it'll be at Old Trafford this year, though.
Hull FC obviously finished seventh, a couple of points behind. I think it was 3 points actually behind Wakefield in the end. Sam, does success in West Hull boil down to avoiding injuries, really, which has been their downfall for a few years now?
Yeah, I think it does, and especially in that forward pack. Obviously, Herman SASA is still injured. John Asiata is still injured. I think James Bell's on the sidelines as well. And I think it's those type of players that, when they are fully fit, they transform that Hull FC pack. And I think that's keeping them fit and keeping them on the field is certainly going to correlate to their success this year. I really like the signing of Arthur Romano. I think he's impressed in pre-season. Scored against Huddersfield and did well against Wigan as well. So yeah, I think he's a really solid signing. Harvey Hill, obviously from Wigan, another one that bolsters that pack. And I think we said it around Christmas time. I think Will Price is certainly going to be up there if he can perform as well as we know he can. I think Will Price is certainly going to be up there for the Man of Steel at the end of the year. Probably a bit of a bold prediction, especially at this early stage. But I think Hull FC really do have the potential this year, and with the signings that they've made, why not? And it's been a few years since they've last been in the finals, and I think that they do just scrape that final sixth position this year. But as we've said before, it's so tight, and anyone can win it, or anyone can be that final playoff place. But yeah, for me, it's Hull FC this year.
Yeah, Pete, I think we've touched on this with you before, but Sam Lasoni is their big money signing this season. Do you rate that?
Don't know. Honestly, not sure. On his day, I think he can be the best impact player in Super League, as he showed for a little spell last year at Leeds. I think he lacks consistency, but maybe Hull will be the environment, and Cartwright will be the coach that brings that out of him. Potentially very good signing. He doesn't play big minutes, and what I understand, he's on a decent contract there. So he's a bit of a luxury. I think he has to perform for them. I mean, you're not going to get much more than 20 minutes or so out of him per game, 25 minutes. So he's under pressure to perform. One of those, I think his season could go either way. I like Sam. I think he's a real character. I think he'll be good for them in the dressing room, and I hope he does well there. But time will tell. I think he's going to be under a bit of pressure at Hull and expectation. People are going to expect him to be coming on and ripping defences to pieces. He's going to have to be on it every week, I think. I say that the thing he lacked at Leeds was consistency. Some games he was almost unstoppable, and one or two others you'd struggle to remember that he was involved at all. So one of those intriguing signings, isn't it? Really, if he goes well, he'll be a real key part of their squad. Hull, I think Hull look good. I think they'll look like a top six team, but we've said that before with this whole side, and sometimes they start well, and I remember them winning at least once early in pre-season at Leeds, and everyone was saying this is going to be Hull's year, and then the wheels come off spectacularly. They always seem to get a huge number of injuries at a certain point of the season to key players, and it never quite happens for them. If they can keep everyone fit and motivated and going well, they'll be right up there challenging. They're a club that's on the up and again highly motivated because of their city rivals are doing well, and that obviously, as you all know, Will, doesn't sit too well in West Hull. I think they'll be more likely to be challenging for the sixth than bumping along near the bottom of the table, but they need to keep everybody fit. And I think if Will Price, as Sam says, if Will Price can have a big year, then they could do something this season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we know what success is for Hull FC, but Pete, what about Bradford coming up into Super League? What is success for Bradford realistically, do you think?
Not finishing bottom. I've said before on this show, I don't have very high expectations for them. I think they did really well to get a convincing cup win at London, as they did yesterday. Tough result that, and it'll have given them some real heart. Some players played well. I think if they can keep everybody fit, they have a decent chance of not finishing bottom. But I just don't think the squad's good enough for more than 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th place. They have the advantage that they've got more of a central handout rather than Toulouse and York. That gives them that bit of an edge. But I don't see their squad as being any stronger than those two. I think it's going to be a tough year for them. They need to play well at home. There's no doubt about that. They've got to try and make Odsal a bit of a fortress. That has to be an advantage for them. It's a strange sort of place to play. It's not the best environment, the most inviting environment for opposition teams, and they need to make the most of that. But I can't see them going to places like Wigan or Hull KR or Warrington or Lee or places like that and winning. I think they're going to have a long, tough year. And I think though they do produce some good young players, I think if they get injuries to key men early on, I think they'll really, really struggle. Certainly bottom three, in my opinion.
Same sort of question about Castleford, Sam. Obviously, I don't think it's up for debate that they've improved the team over the off season, but with so many changes, so much investment, what's par for them? What do you think? What do you think this team is capable of?
I think there's still, like you just mentioned, a lot of unknowns for Castleford, and I don't think they'll really be anywhere near the playoffs. But then again, I don't think they'll be anywhere near the bottom three. I think they'll be kind of in that middle bit of maybe like 9th, 10th, kind of that area. And yeah, it's a lot of changes. The early signs are not really promising. I know you can't really take anything from a pre-season friendly, but losing 40 points to 10 to St Helens is not a great start, and then only winning 14-0 against Doncaster again in the Challenge Cup is again not. It's good that they got the win, but it's not exactly a promising victory as other teams have gone to Championship opposition and put 60, 70, 80 on them, and not doing that maybe just shows kind of where Castleford are. I don't feel like I don't want to be too harsh because there is a lot of unknowns and the season's only. Well, the Super League season's not even started yet, but I just think that they've made some good signings, and if the likes of Blake Taff, Michaela Ravalawa, those type of players can step up and show that the form that got them, the NRL appearances that they do have, I think that'll really bode well for him. I really like the signing of Jordan Lane from Hull FC. I think he's just kind of that forward option that is reliable. He's nothing. He's not your star player. He's not your first name on your team sheet, but he's one of them reliable players that just gets the job done. Similar to Alex Mellor, who will partner him in the back row. And I think they do have the talented squad in the backs. It's just that forward pack that is a bit of a concern, especially in that back row. They've got the Lane and Mellor, as I mentioned, but behind that, you know, if either of them two get injured, who's going to come in and replace them? And it's that kind of depth that is a little bit worrying for Castleford at this moment in time. But yeah, I think it's a season of transformation. There's not really going to be any pressure on Ryan Carr. Obviously, he's got a 3-year deal. Castleford have gone through a whole host of bosses over the past few seasons, and I think this one, the Ryan Carr era, is one that he'll be here to stay, especially for this season and probably next season as well.
Here to stay. Sam Burgess?
I like Ryan Carr, as I've probably said before. I thought he did really well at Featherstone. He inherited a team that was in pretty dire straits when he came in, and he turned them around and got them into the playoffs in the second tier. I think he gets it, what Castleford's all about. I think he understands the nature of Castleford and how much it means, the team means to the community, and how much it means for them to do well. He's got experience on backroom staff in the NRL as well as in Super League. I think he's a really good coach, and I think he'll do well there. As Sam says, they've got a much better back line than they have forwards, but I think they're going to put a lot of emphasis on doing well at their home ground. I think I can't see them being top 6, but I think they'll surprise some people this year. And it's an interesting point made about the Challenge Cup. They won 14-0 at Doncaster, a bit like Leeds winning 25-12 at Widnes. Every fans are looking at that and saying, no, it's going to be a long year. That's a poor performance, a poor result. I'm not sure that it is, really. I think that might be a lot more handy than winning 92-0 or 104-0 or 82-6 like Wakefield did at Swinton. I think both Leeds and Castleford's coaches will have learned more about their side from seeing them dig deep and tough out a win than romping to victory like some sides did. This time last year, Leeds put more than 90 points on West's Warriors, the amateur club, and then lost in Super League round 1 a week later to Wakefield. I think they'll both, Carr and Brad Arthur, will have got something out of that last weekend, and their sides will be battle-hardened. I think that's the phrase that Brad Arthur used after the Widnes game. They'll be battle-hardened. I don't see those results as a problem. From Cass's point of view, that's a game that they could have lost this time last year. Remember, they went to Bradford and were turned over in the Challenge Cup. They've been in a tough battle and they've come through and they nilled the opposition. I know it's only part-time opposition, but even so, they kept them to nil in a tough game, and I think that'll do them a lot of good. Cass will be a lot better this year. They're certainly not going to be in the bottom 3, in my opinion. Probably not top 6 either. But I think you can see some foundations being put into place at Tigers. As long as everything's okay off the field, I think in terms of the squad, I think they've got a good coach in place. They've got a good director of rugby in Chris Chester, who did really well at Lee, and we'll be looking to emulate that at Cass. And I can see better times ahead for Castleford.
Yeah, we've got. I think we've got. If my maths is correct, we've got 3 teams left to discuss. So let's start with Warrington. Then, Sam, you said Ryan Carr's here to stay. Is Sam Burgess as well?
I think we mentioned it earlier, but I think Sam Burgess is the Super League head coach that's under the most pressure this season. He's in a contract year, and if things go similar to the way that 2025 did for Warrington, I don't think there's any way that Sam Burgess's contract gets renewed. That being said, they've got rid of a few players that maybe kind of always kind of a negative effects on the squad, and they've brought in some really good players in the forward pack. Liam Byrne at Wigan is just a solid prop forward. He'll get on with his job, and we won't be anything flash, but he'll get the job done. They brought in James Bentley from Leeds Rhinos, who, if he's on form, he's one of the better back rowers in the league. And then in the backs, I really like the signing of Josh Smith. Well, I don't really know a lot about him, but from the pre-season things that I've seen from him and the highlights I've seen from the Q Cup, he seems a really astute signing, able to play all across the back line, and he's got pace to burn. So I think that's a really solid addition. I think the one thing at Warrington is, especially now that George Williams is gone, how does his inevitable exit affect the squad, and how do they react to that? Obviously, he's got one final season at Warrington, and it's how both he reacts as a player and how he performs, but how the whole squad kind of prepare for his exit. They've got Ewan Irwin, who is a really promising halfback at the club. He's recently signed a 5-year deal, so it's whether they kind of bleed him into the squad, especially if they know that they're not going to get playoffs at the end of the season, kind of bleed him in and then start preparing for 2027. But to go back to your original point, do I think Sam Burgess will be Warrington head coach in 12 months' time? It's no. I will say no.
Okay, then. Pete, do Warrington have to start fast for you, or can you see them building into the season?
You'd say that about all clubs, can't you? It's, with the playoff format, you can afford to start shaky. And there was the year, was it 3 years ago under Darryl Powell, when they set off like a rocket, and then I think they won something like the first 8 games, and it was going to be their year, and then it all fell spectacularly apart. So I don't know. I don't know how Warrington are going to do this season. They're another of these clubs anywhere from 7th or 8th down to 3rd or 4th from bottom. But I do agree with Sam. I'm not much of one for predictions, but one thing I'm pretty certain of is that Sam Burgess won't be coached next year. I think it'll probably be Steve McNamara. And good luck to him. I think he's a good coach. And I think his influence will be important for them this year as well.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic there, how that pans out. We'll see. Pete, sticking with you just for the second to last one, York Knights. Obviously a team, semi-well. Who's the signings we need to be looking out for there this season?
Obviously Vaughan is an eye-catching signing. I think he signed before promotion was confirmed to Super League, and everyone went, wow, coming in from Warrington, very experienced player. I think he's the main man for them. As mentioned earlier, they're not getting full central funding, so they're up against it, them and Toulouse from the start. There's no expectation on York at all. It's hard to see them finishing anywhere higher than 3rd from bottom, but I think they've potentially got a better squad, actually, if they can keep everybody fit, than Toulouse and Bradford. They've got some old heads in there. Whether that's a good thing or not, it remains to be seen. But people like Ben Jones-Bishop and Paul McShane, who seem to have accepted that their time in Super League was over and were going part-time, and suddenly they found themselves back in the top flight as full-time players. If they I think, are capable of holding things together a little bit. York are another of those clubs that are going to find it really hard against most opposition, but their realistic goal is, like Bradford's and like Toulouse, is to not finish bottom. Mark Applegarth's a very good coach. He was unfairly treated at Wakefield, in my opinion, when they were relegated a few years ago, but he's done a fantastic job at York to get them to top spot in the Championship last season and the grand final when they didn't play well and they were beaten by Toulouse. But he knows how to get the most out of his players. I think what he can get out of them is limited. That they don't have the quality that most squads have. But certainly early in the year, I don't think they'll be pushovers. They're going to lose a lot more games than they win. But I don't think they'll finish bottom.
Sam, Toulouse, obviously, again, very much in a similar sort of situation to York, but they haven't made a boatload of signings. They have been in Super League before, though, I think it was 2022. So 3-4 years ago. Does that make them better equipped to handle the step up to Super League this year? Do they? Go on, Pete, answer that question for us.
I'm not sure that it does. I think they certainly they're better placed. Talking to to Sylvain Hules, he thinks that they're stronger, but they have a lot against them, don't they? The travel and the funding aspect. A bit like Catalan, though, playing at Toulouse in the height of summer is not easy. I think they'll win some home games. I think they're going to struggle to get very far away from home. Some of their players we don't know an awful lot about, but I think that that squad wise, that I'm not sure it's a Super League squad. I think they're going to be a bottom two team, but I'd like to see them do well. I like Sylvain Hules. I like the way he tries to get his teams to play, and I think it would be good to have another French team doing well in Super League. I just think that they're up against it from the start. I think some of the sport doesn't want them in Super League. It's tough for them, and I think they're going to have a difficult year, bottom two, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's do a few predictions then. Sam, is your Wi-Fi okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm all right now.
Right, so grand final winner, League Leader Shield winner, Man of Steel winner. I'll start. So Man of Steel, despite what's been said on this, I'm going Jackson Hastings. I just think with the current voting system, I can see him picking up more points more often than not. League Leader Shield, I'm going to go Wigan. I just think they're going to be the most consistent team this season in terms of how they bounce back from a trophy this year. I can see Hull KR starting slowly, as we've said on this podcast earlier on. Obviously, they've got the World Club Challenge. They're going to Vegas. We saw how Vegas last season teams had a hangover. So, yeah, I can see Hull KR starting slowly, but I'm also tipping them to retain their title and win the grand final.
Who comes last? Well, I think we need to say who's going to finish last as well.
Okay, I'll go Toulouse for reasons that we've already really covered. Yeah. What about you two, Sam?
Yeah, I'm similar to you, and I've got Wigan as League Leader Shield. I think, as you've said, Hull KR's early start of the season, I think will cost them in the league, and I think Wigan will look to capitalise on that. And I think that they will do, and I think they'll just kind of stay at the top. I'm hoping it's going to be as competitive as last season, because obviously last season's league leaders went kind of down to the last 3 or 4 rounds. And if it's anything like that, we'll be in for a treat. What are we? Challenge Cup. I said it last week. I think St Helens will win the Challenge Cup. I think I think a better season for St Helens will be a 5th place in a Challenge Cup rather than maybe a 2nd or a 3rd and nothing. And I think that'll be a great first year for Paul Rowley. While we're finishing bottom, I thought, yeah, like Will said, Toulouse, I think just with the squad that they've got, they've not really made that many recruits. I did speak to Sylvain Hules last week, and he said he's confident in his squad, which is why they've not really needed to make that many recruits. However, the majority is a championship squad, and it's how they react to Super League. And I just think of the other two, Bradford and York, I think that they've made the most experienced signings and the ones that'll get them over the line in them tough conditions, in them tough wins that they do manage to get. And finally, grand final, I think Wigan will do the double. I think Wigan will league leaders and grand final. And yeah, I think Matt Peter will have a more successful season than he did in 2025.
What about
Oh, Man of Steel. Well, I did say Will Price, but however, I don't think he will get it. I think it's reported that the Man of Steel system will go back to a voting panel at the end of the season as opposed to the 3-2-1 point system. And I think that really favours Bevan French. I think, he more often than not, he puts in, a game breaker of a performance. And I think it's those kind of performances that will win him his second Man of Steel.
Pete?
Man of Steel, Bevan French, but just to give someone different, Lockie Miller. League leaders, St Helens. I'm going to regret saying that, but league leaders, St Helens. Grand final winners, Wigan. Bottom, Bradford, because I think that Toulouse will pick up some wins at home in the middle of summer when it's very, very difficult and they don't have a summer up Bodsall. So I think Bradford for last place.
All right, let's just quickly look ahead to some of the talking points of round one. And I'm very aware we've been recording nearly an hour, but Pete, first game of the season, York, Hull KR, that's looking like a sellout. That's fantastic for the city of York, isn't it?
It's fantastic. Yep, there'll be 8,000 or so there. It's obviously going to be tough for York. I was there this time last year when they lost at home to Hull KR in the Challenge Cups. I think it was 40-odd too. I think it might be a little bit closer this time. I don't think Mark Applegarth needs to do a team talk because Hull KR apparently requested an easy start and were given York. That should have York fully motivated, but Hull KR will win it.
Warrington, St Helens. Sam, who needs the win more in round one there?
You'd say Warrington because you'd think that over the course of the season, St Helens will pick up them wins in the bigger games more often than Warrington do. Paul Rowley will want to start his Super League career with Saints off to a good start and, getting a win over a top team, a big team, even though they've not really shown it last season. He'll certainly do that. I think it's a really intriguing game. I do think Saints will get the win. However, I think Warrington kind of need it more to get their season off to a good start and kind of prove their own fans wrong that this year is going to be different. I think they're going to really struggle if they don't start well. I think they're going to struggle to get the fans back on side. And I think Warrington need the win more. However, I think St Helens will come out on top.
Pete, Lee versus Leeds. Is that just as tough as it gets for an away fixture in the round one for Leeds? And can you see them picking up the 2 points there?
I think both teams have got injury worries. We need to see what sort of squads are put out. Leeds have picked up an injury in every game they've played so far, including the cup tie when Mikolaj Oledzki got a bang to the ribs and he didn't look in a good state afterwards. But they also have their issues. That's one of those 50-50 games, isn't it? But Leeds have won at Lee the last 2 seasons. And if they're going to be title challengers, they'll feel that they need to go there and win games like that. However, if Lee are aiming for second places or top spot, as some people think, it's a game they have to win as well. So it's a really intriguing fixture. It's a shame it's on the same night as Warrington Saints, isn't it? It's sort of been a nice Saturday afternoon fixture for Sky, but could go either way. I'm going to avoid making a prediction.
Sitting firmly on the fence there.
I'll predict a narrow away win for Leeds then, if you want a prediction.
I think that will do us, to be honest with you. We're approaching an hour now, so thanks for watching, guys. Can we, if you could you like this video and subscribe to our channel? That would be a big help for us. Obviously, we're back next Monday to discuss everything that happened in round one and to look ahead to the World Club Challenge as well as Hull KR take on Brisbane Broncos. So, thanks for joining us. Cheers. Thanks for joining us. Please like and share, and we'll see you next week.